Reporting live from Jane Equipment. Today we're going to be giving you an overview of a belt-driven 4 gallon a minute 3500 PSI unit. What we have here today is the EB4040HG. That's the part number by Pressure Pro. This is powered by a Honda GX390, commonly known as a 13 horsepower engine. And attached to it, it has a General Pump TSS 1511, which is rated at 4 gallons a minute, 3500 PSI. Before we start going over all the components and what's on this unit, I always get this question a lot, and people say, well, why should I get a belt drive over a direct drive? So, that's the first thing I want to go over. So, the reason I tell people they should be buying a belt drive and not a direct drive is if you're going to be running your unit, I would say more than 4 hours a day, 5 days a week. So if you're putting a lot of hours of run time on your unit, especially all the time, in one window, where I just expect this to run for 5 hours straight or something like that, or really put that kind of workload on it, I always recommend a belt drive. And the reason is, whenever you have a belt drive system, the pump is actually operating or rotating at only half the speed of the engine. So the pumps are really working half as hard to create the same amount of work or pressure or flow that a direct drive does. And because of that, they tend to last a lot longer. So, if you're wondering what's the difference between belt drive and direct drive and why should I go one or the other, that's really the big reason. It depends on the hours you're putting on the unit, what you're expecting to get out of it, and your longevity. Belt drives where to go. Obviously, the drawbacks are that belt drive is a little more expensive than direct drive units, but that is the reason why. So let's jump into some components here. We'll start over here on the pump side. Down here we have our inlet filter, garden hose inlet, with a little filter inside. Whenever you're running a pressure washer, whether you're on a garden hose or tank feed, you always want to have some type of filter. Even a simple $1 filter like this one will save you when the time comes. Up here on our outlet side of the pressure washer, or where the water is going to be exiting the system, we have our unloader or pressure regulator. You would back this off or unscrew it to lower your pressure. You would crank it down lower to increase your pressure. I don't really recommend using this to change your pressure on the fly a lot, but it is what it does. Over here we have our bypass line, and what this does is when you release the trigger on your gun, the water needs somewhere to go, and since we've stopped the water exiting the system, it circulates it back down and back in a circular motion across the head, where it'll continue to cycle until you pull the trigger again. So if you ever hear someone referring to a machine in cycle or cycling, it means that you're off the trigger and the water is just kind of rotating around. Moving over here to the engine, obviously this is a recoil start engine. Here's our pull start. This is our throttle control. I very rarely find myself moving this unless I am running some kind of diagnostic on the engine. I really won't mention this. Up here we have our choke. Good for when you're starting your engine first thing in the day. It's kind of cold. You usually choke it, get it going, and then get it running. Right here is our fuel control. Either our fuel line is open or our fuel line is closed. I use this for one specific reason, and it's actually really important, so I'm going to touch on it. If you're storing your unit, putting it away, and you're not going to use it, let's say over the winter, over the season, or even an extended period amount of time, longer than maybe 2 weeks, what I like to do is while I'm running my unit, I'll actually cut the fuel off. So I'll bring this lever this way while the unit's on, and I'll allow it to essentially run out of gas. I'll let it run until it turns off because I've cut its fuel line. The reason I'm doing that is because it's gonna burn all the fuel out of my carburetor and keep all of the gunk really out of my carburetor because I burned it clean. So if anything bad does happen to my fuel, it's all isolated to the tank. Obviously drop some stable in there so that kind of stuff doesn't happen. But if you're ever storing your unit, it's always good to just let it kind of run out of gas by cutting it there. Moving on here, we have our carburetor right here on this unit. Our air filter is gonna be just beneath here. This is our muffler. This is our cylinder head. Coming over here, we have our belt. underneath this belt cover, so I'm going to expose it for you guys. It's just one Phillips head screw on these newer models. If you have an older model from Pressure Pro or Stealth, you might have a few other screws kind of around the casing. Just keep an eye out for them. Pulling this right off to expose the belt here. You see it actually has 3 individual belts. This belt size is a 3VX335. It's really good information to have. It's a 3VX335 belt. It does come with 3 individual belts. And I'll also show you guys that the pulley on the engine side is half of the size of the pulley on the pump side. And that kind of goes back into why the pump is running at half speed. Because when this rotates twice around, this will have only rotated once. So because of that, the pump is essentially running at half the speed of the engine, which is increasing our longevity. And I just kind of wanted to show you guys the belt. Your belt should always be straight, nice and taut, still got a little bit of motion. You don't want them so tight where they break on you as soon as you go to run it, but there's the motion. One thing I'll touch on here is I always recommend whenever you do change this belt, because the time will come one day, I recommend switching to a 3-wide belt. It's still the same size, a 3VX335. Okay, so this is actually not the correct size. I have a 55 here, but the idea is the same. As you can see, this belt is all 3 belts in one. Instead of 3 individual belts like this, it's much stronger this way. So whenever I change these belts, I always go to a 3-wide belt instead of 3 individuals. Just wanted to touch on that. The last component that's attached to our pressure washer pump here is over here, once again on the inlet side. This is a thermal relief valve. What this is designed to do is if you've left your machine in cycle for too long and the water in the pump head might get a little hot, this will relieve the hot water out of the pump. I always kind of say it's a dummy switch. You don't want this to ever relieve. If this does relieve, you're leaving it in cycle too long. Don't do that. Really, you should only leave your machine in cycle mode if you're hooked up to a garden hose for no longer than 1 to 2 minutes. Anything after that, you should just turn it off. If you're on a tank setup and you're bypassing back to your tank, then you can honestly leave it cycle for pretty much forever. Another thing I want to touch on, you're getting a new unit. You might see something like this. These units are supposed to come with this yellow breathable cap. If you see it with this red cap like this on a general pump, this is a shipping cap. Before you turn this on, you definitely want to switch your oil caps. You want to make sure you're using this as your correct cap for everyday usage. This is only a shipping cap. Honestly, once you remove it and put this cap on, you can probably discard that because you're most likely not going to need it anymore unless you're going to ship your unit around. Another thing I'd like to mention is, my units do come with a quart of oil because a lot of times Honda engines are not going to ship with oil in them. So if you're, always check your Honda engine oil before you run it, especially if you're getting it brand new off the truck, you're getting it from any showroom floor. Always check your oil. A lot of Honda units are not shipping with oil anymore. So check for that. This unit does come with 50 feet of high pressure line and a pressure washer gun and 3-foot lance. It's going to come with a giant 21290 gun, pretty popular gun, and it's coming with a general pump 3-foot lance. This is coming on an aluminum frame and has air-filled tires. That's pretty much everything about this unit and every component that's coming on here. It also does come with a chemical injector. I'm going to have a different video talking about chemical injectors, how to use them and how they work. So if you have questions about a chemical injector, you can check out that video. Last thing I'm going to touch on is some maintenance tips for this unit. So on this unit, if it's brand new, after 20 hours of usage, you want to drop your engine oil and your pump oil and change them out. They're both individual oils. The engine's going to take 10W30. The pump is going to take pump oil. Use the manufacturer's recommendation. If it's your very first oil change on a brand new unit, you might see some metal flakes in your oil. That's normal. It's a break-in period. That's what you're trying to get out. That's why we're changing oil so fast. After that first oil change, you can go 100 hours or every season. Just keep your oil changed. These Honda engines are monsters. As long as you change your oil, it'll probably outlast all of us. You can, you know, hand this down to your children, because these Honda engines really do last a very long time as long as you keep them maintained. That's pretty much everything about this unit. Once again, this was a belt-driven 4 gallon a minute, 3,500 PSI unit. This one is a Pressure Pro unit, and I believe the part number on it was EB4040HG. Have a great day out there, guys.